December 28, 1944, near Bastogne in the frozen Ardennes, a captured German order arrived at 3rd Army headquarters describing a field hospital fire that had not been an accident of artillery. A retreating Wehrmacht general had directed his engineers to torch a structure flying the Red Cross before withdrawing, citing the building's potential future use by advancing American forces. 11 wounded men were inside to survive. General George S. Patton Jr. read the captured order himself before noon. What Patton did next was not recorded in most accounts of the war. If this is the kind of history that matters to you, stories where the record actually holds up, where the details come from documents and memoirs and unit logs rather than myth, then subscribe to this channel and leave a like before we go further. Costs you nothing and it tells us this work is worth continuing. By late December 1944, the 3rd Army was 3 weeks into the fighting in the Bulge following Patton's extraordinary turn to relieve Bastogne. Since activation on August 1, 1944, the Army had advanced over 500 miles and absorbed roughly 100,000 casualties across 5 months of continuous combat. The winter weather in the Ardennes was the worst the men had endured. Sub-zero temperatures compounding losses already mounting from the German counter-offensive. Patton was pushing his divisions hard to close the salient and restore the original line, driving his commanders with the same urgency that had carried 3rd Army across France that summer. The Geneva Convention of 1929, ratified by Germany in 1934, was unambiguous that medical facilities marked with the Red Cross were protected installations under all circumstances of war, and that the deliberate destruction of such a facility, particularly with patients inside, constituted a direct violation regardless of any operational justification offered for it. A retreating commander destroying captured infrastructure was common practice. Destroying a hospital with wounded men still inside was a war crime under the same law Germany had signed. The order, recovered by 3rd Army intelligence, bore the signature of General Lieutenant Kurt Brenner, 52 years old, commanding a division, withdrawing through the area under pressure from the American advance. His unit record, cross-referenced against captured documents, placed him with forces that had been retreating steadily since the failure of the German offensive's northern thrust in mid-December. Brenner was not SS. He was a career Wehrmacht officer, the kind of professional soldier the Allied legal apparatus found harder to dismiss as ideologically fanatical, which made the deliberateness of his order more difficult to explain away as the conduct of a true believer, other than a calculated decision by an experienced commander who understood exactly what the building represented under international law. The order itself, captured intact among Brenner's divisional papers when his rear headquarters was overrun, instructed engineers to deny the structure to advancing American forces by any means necessary, including fire, with explicit acknowledgement that the building was marked and in use as a hospital. 11 wounded American soldiers were inside at the time the order was carried out to escape through a side door before flames made the building unsurvivable. 9 did not. Patton was 59 years old that December, a soldier since his 1909 graduation from West Point, a veteran of Pershing's Mexican expedition in 1916, wounded commanding a tank brigade in France in 1918, and a man whose career had nearly ended in August 1943 when he struck to hospitalized soldiers in Sicily he believed were avoiding combat. That history was not abstract here. He was a man whose own temper had once endangered wounded soldiers under his protection, and he was now reading a written order from an enemy general who had calculated, with no temper involved at all, that 9 wounded Americans were an acceptable cost of denying a building to the advance. According to General Hobart Gay's diary, held in part at the Virginia Military Institute archives, Patton read the captured document twice before setting it down. He asked first whether the document's authenticity and chain of custody had been verified by intelligence officers, and was told it had. Recovered alongside Brenner's other operational papers with his signature confirmed against known samples. He asked second whether any of the 9 men who died had been identified by name through unit records or dog tags recovered at the scene. He was told identification was still underway given the condition of the site. Patton's instruction, recorded by Gay in paraphrase, was direct. He said that a verbal order destroyed a building, but a written order destroyed the man who signed it, and that Brenner had been careless or arrogant enough to put his name on a document that would now outlive the war itself as evidence. He directed that the order be photographed, the original preserved without damage, and the case opened formally under the Judge Advocate General's office with Brenner named as the accused regardless of whether he was ever captured. He said the file was not contingent on catching the man. The file existed because the crime existed. The case file built by the Third Army's Judge Advocate General section around Brenner's order was unusual in the same way the Faust case had been months earlier. The primary evidence was not a witness account requiring corroboration and cross-examination. It was a written order, signed, dated, recovered intact, and authenticated by intelligence officers comparing the signature against known samples from Brenner's other operational correspondence. The JAG officer assigned to the case built the file around the document itself, supplementing it with the testimony of the 2 surviving wounded men who had escaped the building, and with forensic identification of the remains of the 9 men who had not, eventually confirmed through dental records and personal effects recovered at the site. Brenner was never captured. His division was encircled and largely destroyed during the fighting near the Rhine in March 1945, and surviving prisoners from his command could not confirm his fate with certainty, some suggesting he had been killed in the final fighting, others that he had been taken prisoner under a different identification and never matched to the open case against him. The file remained open regardless, exactly as Patton had directed, built on a document that would outlast any uncertainty about the men who signed it. Patton's own record on these matters carried genuine contradiction that deserves to be stated plainly. The Bastogne massacre of July 1943, in which American soldiers under his command in Sicily killed approximately 73 unarmed prisoners, produced courts-martial that most serious military historians, including Carlo Dess and Patton, genius for war, have characterized as inadequate, and his own pre-battle rhetoric urging his men to show no mercy was cited by defense counsel as contributing to the climate that produced the killings. The distance between his handling of Bastogne in 1943 and his insistence here, 18 months later, on preserving a case file against an enemy general who might never face trial, reflects the same tension Martin Blumenson documents throughout. The Patton papers between his instinct for operational aggression and his instinct for legal accountability. Both were real. The record shows both clearly. The 9 American soldiers who died in that hospital deserve acknowledgement even where the historical record, focused as it inevitably is on the commanders and the legal proceedings, has not preserved most of their names in any account accessible to the public. They were wounded men already removed from the fighting, already under the protection the laws of war were specifically designed to guarantee them. And they died not from the chaos of combat, but from a calculated administrative decision made by a man who understood precisely what the building represented and ordered its destruction anyway. Their absence from popular memory of the Bulge, while the maneuvers and the relief of Bastogne are retold endlessly, is itself part of the injustice this record exists to address. The broader context surrounding this incident includes the Malmedy massacre weeks earlier and the discovery that following spring of the Ohrdruf concentration camp, the first such camp liberated by American forces, which Patton visited in April 1945 and which left him physically ill at what he found there. Incidents like Brenner's order, methodically documented and preserved regardless of whether the perpetrator ever stood trial, fed directly into the evidentiary foundation later used at the Dachau proceedings and referenced in the broader Nuremberg framework, where the principle that a written order could itself constitute conclusive evidence of individual criminal responsibility was formally established as a cornerstone of post-war international Patton did not live to see that framework fully built. He died on December 21, 1945, 12 days after a traffic accident near Mannheim left him paralyzed from the neck down. He was buried at the Luxembourg American Cemetery among the soldiers of the Third Army. At his own request, beneath a standard white cross identical to those marking the graves around him, the laws of war are not self-enforcing. They require someone willing to preserve a document, build a file, and name an accused man even when no court will ever convene to hear the case, because the record itself, complete and accurate, is sometimes the only justice history is able to deliver.